Set a timer for 1 hour. Okay, I am about to not even recognize myself, but I'm going to finish some things today. I'm gonna actually finish some of my knitting projects. So if you've been following my channel, thanks for coming back, even though I haven't really had a meaningful finished object in like 2 months. I have just been on like a cast-on binge this summer, and the tides are turning. I am now entering a finishing phase of my life, okay? I've been kind of procrastinating on finishing a few different projects, and I thought, why not kind of force myself into doing it by making my space cozy. I've got a little candle, I've got a little mug of peppermint tea, I've got all of your cozy essentials, got my little pile of things to finish, and I've got my little pile of tools that I need. If my cozy setup wasn't like bribery enough for me, I thought, why don't I also film it? And anyone on YouTube, if you're watching this, if you have something that you also have kind of been avoiding finishing for a project that's just not a part of the project that you love to do, you can grab it and do it along with me. We're in, you know, solidarity together of actually confronting the things that we're procrastinating on. So that's the theme for today's video. I also just set a timer for 1 hour. I have to leave to go do something in an hour, so that is also reason enough for me to not procrastinate on this any longer. And here's the projects that I am going to finish today. So first I have this cardigan. I know that wool is flame resistant, but if you've lit a support candle for yourself as well, move it out of the way before you start flinging loose ends around. So this is a cardigan that I shared in progress on my most recent podcast episode, but I finished it. I wove in, I think, all the ends, but I need to sew on some buttons. So I'm gonna sew some buttons onto this guy. And then I have this silk top that I also showed in a recent podcast episode. I've added some lace around the front V-neck and the bottom, and I really need to block it before I decide how I want to finish those edges because I'm not sure how much they're gonna roll. So I don't know why, I'm the worst at procrastinating on blocking, so I figured why not do that in this session too. But first I'm gonna do this cardigan because I actually want to wear it in like an hour. So I got these buttons from this yarn store called Downtown Yarns. They gave them to me in this cute little paper pouch, and they're tortoiseshell plastic buttons that I'll show you. Oops. Okay, I don't need that many anyway. So here's the buttons. So I already knitted the button band with the buttonhole, so I just need to line it up to make sure that I'm putting them in the right place. So I've got one here. Here's my little sewing kit. I've got some kind of cream colored yarn or thread. My little collapsible scissors that I'm obsessed with. They're really sharp though, and I did accidentally, when I was collapsing them recently, almost stabbed my, sorry, not almost, literally did stab the tip into my thumb, but we're okay, it healed. Okay, I'm like procrastinating by talking about this. Okay, so grab some thread. So I'll tell you actually about where I got these buttons. So I got them at the yarn shop Downtown Yarns in, I guess, kind of the East Village, New York. I don't remember the exact address. I was visiting a friend in New York who also knits, and we did like a little field trip together there. And I was so charmed by this little shop. So it's teeny tiny. It's like, you know when you see those little things that people make in bookshelves sometimes, where it's like the width of a book, but someone carved out a little space that feels like a little cozy magical space. That's kind of how I feel about this little yarn shop. You know what? Before I do this, let me make sure that these buttons actually fit through. Okay. It's a squeeze, but they do. When you first walk in, they spit your hands, which is so nice because, you know, you're like coming off the subway where you've been touching a pole that like literally millions of other people touch on a regular basis. And then you're walking into a store where you're going to touch everything, and then you're gonna buy things that probably a billion other people have touched. If they've like been on the shelves, you know, they've been touched. So I thought that was a really nice touch. Is touch a real word anymore? I thought that was a really nice thing to do. Like, it makes sense why they would want people to have really clean hands before they touch all their stuff. But I also just like felt better about it because I was there on a pretty hot, sticky day, which is like most of the summer in New York. And it just felt good to not be like grimy going in there. So I really appreciated that. And then the person working there was just like the sweetest, kindest, most helpful little like fairy of a human being. The shop itself is really small, like I said, but I feel like they actually have a lot of selection of things that I would be interested in using. Like they had a ton of Noro yarn, which I've actually never used before, but they had a lot of mohair, hand-dyed things, brands that I'd like seen before but never actually used. And they also had really cool samples up on the wall of like different things that local fiber artists had made. One of them was machine knitted. I don't remember the name of the person. I'll see if I can remember and put it here. But it was using this like wavy yarn. I'll add a photo here that changes in thickness. They didn't have a color that I was interested in using, but I really want to try that on my knitting machine now because apparently that sample was made on a knitting machine. So I thought that was super cool. I don't think my local yarn shop here doesn't really have that many notions. Like they don't really have many buttons to choose from. That was actually something I never really thought of until I went to a different yarn store in New York earlier this year, Brooklyn General, which had a bunch of like ribbons and fabrics. They were just kind of a generally more of like a, I guess, haberdashery sort of store, which I learned recently is a word. Sounds like made up from Sherlock Holmes novel or something. But anyway, so they had these little tubes of buttons and I knew that I wanted to get some tortoiseshell buttons for this cardigan anyway. And these aren't exactly what I was picturing, to be honest. They're like a little plasticier and a little more transparent than I was expecting, or not that I was expecting, than I was originally intending. But there's something that I really like about getting kind of like a souvenir from a place or a trip that you've been on, especially if like it's a project that I've been working on that trip. So I really liked the idea of having something from this shop that is sort of like when I wear this sweater again, I'll think about where I was when I worked on it and I'll remember that I went to the store with my friend. And I don't know, I just really like that idea that you have a little like memory sort of woven into an article of clothing that you made. I think that is something really special about clothing in general, you know, that it can like carry kind of sentimentality into it because you think about like, you know, you look at an old piece of clothing, you think about where you were and also like who you were when you bought it. I think that's especially true for things that you've made yourself. Like there's definitely projects I look back on and I feel like I just have these really strong like sensory memories of holding them and feeling them in my hands and working on them when I was in different places, like figuratively and literally. Like my first sweater number 15 that I made from My Favorite Things Knitwear, I worked on it. I started it when I was in California. I was like going back just to kind of close out my old apartment there, which was kind of an emotional experience because I moved to Vermont during COVID and I wasn't expecting to stay here. And I casted that sweater on in a very like deliberate attempt for some self-care. And I don't know, I look back at making that sweater and how I felt when I was casting it on, and I feel like I really like was doing that to take care of myself, and that's kind of nice that I have this I don't know, tactile memory, I guess, of that time. And you know, I also knitted it when I got back to Vermont out in the garden, and I just remember like feeling the yarn in my hands. It was my first time I think that I ever worked with mohair held with merino, and it was also my first time doing like a fully cabled sweater, and it just felt beautiful. It just felt like I was making a beautiful object. And I love that that memory of making the object is also kind of interspersed with like memories of sitting in the garden at a place that I used to live, looking at like the clouds, looking at all the plants, like the flowers blooming in the garden, being in San Francisco, sitting in the sunlight at my favorite bakery there, you know, kind of making peace with the fact that I was actually moving on from that city. So yeah, that was a really long ramble. But I think there's something to be said for souvenirs, basically. So not deep of a thing to come back to, but that was why I really wanted to get these buttons in particular, even if I felt like there might be a more perfect button somewhere out there in the world. I really wanted a button that I don't know, I wanted to bring a piece of that trip back with me in this sweater. So I really liked that. And the rest of the yarn store in general, like it was just so cute. I also, and maybe I should save this to talk about in my next podcast episode, but I also got my first sock yarn, which I was very much influenced by my friend that I was with because she is a major sock knitter. So she was definitely egging me on because I was kind of like, you know, it's hard to buy something when you're not exactly sure what you're gonna use it for. And I found this really cute pink and purple yarn, and I've got plans for it. But you're gonna have to wait to hear what they are because I'm definitely gonna make a video about it. But it is really cute. Okay, I'm already 2 buttons down. I just always button them as I go to make sure that I'm not screwing it up. And then I'm also, since these buttons are all the same, like they don't actually have very much variation in them, I'm kind of rotating them all because I don't want it to look like really obvious that it's fake variation. You know what I mean? Like they all have the same pattern. It's like when you see, I don't know, bathroom tiles that all are meant to look like they're actual stone, but they're really just printed tiles. And if you line them up the wrong way, it just becomes really obvious that it's like a pattern printed on it instead of organic material. So I'm trying to rotate these buttons as I sew them on so that it gives the illusion of more variation than there actually is. Okay, kind of looking like a cardigan. I kind of feel like I actually finished this because I've actually already blocked this and I wove in the end, so that is one off of my list. Give you a little close up on how the buttons are looking. One down, and I need to leave to go somewhere in like 15 minutes, so I think I'm just gonna try this on quickly to see. I think I'm happy with that. I'm sure there's like button sizes that are meant to be exactly the right amount, you know, diameter to sew in. I don't know, I just try to shove them through and hope that the button's a little bit bigger than the hole because that way it won't get loose. Might re-sew the bottom one. I think it did it a little bit too high up, but I'm gonna say this is good for now. I have more to say about this cardigan. I'm gonna save it for my next podcast episode because this episode, we're not showing things off. We're just finishing. We're just doing the things that I don't like to do. And I do like to talk about my projects, so I'm going to withhold that pleasure until next time. But I do have more to say about this. So I guess if you're not a subscriber and you wanna see the deal with that one, follow me. Okay, I gotta go soon. So my next thing that I wanna just get done, I am a huge procrastinator when it comes to blocking things. Like I've let things sit for months before I blocked them, but this tank that I've been working on, this silk one, has some lace around the collar and bottom. So it's super curled because that's like normal for lace. And I haven't decided yet what finishing edge I wanna give for the neckline in the bottom. So I want to block it first to see how much will it roll post blocking, and also just to get a better sense of it, like to be able to see better how close it comes to closing in the front and like if I need a thicker border or what. I have a few different, like I might do an I-cord, I might do a picot with crochet, I might do a double knitted border. I'm not really sure. So I need to block this. I just did a little bit of Googling, and for blocking, basically very, very gentle cold water or spritz until it's damp. I don't have a way to spritz, like I don't have a spritz bottle. So I'm gonna try just soaking it and trying to be really gentle with it. It works out, I hope. Like literally just felt paralyzed for a second being like, what if I'm about to ruin this thing that I've spent like dozens of hours on? Let me see if I have a spritz bottle. Okay, I did find a little spritz bottle from a travel set. Let's try to go with that because I'm scared. I did wet block a swatch, but I feel paranoid and I put so much time into this that I'm so scared I'm gonna somehow fuck it up. So, excuse me, the language. So these are my little blocking boards, and I've got my spritz bottle and I've got some blocking pins. I also haven't woven in any of the ends yet because I'm impatient. And I just haven't felt like doing that yet. So I'm also, that's another reason to not wet block it for now. I really just want to like be able to make a quick decision point. So like I said, I feel like this year so far has been basically a cast on binge, which, I don't know. I think I've just felt really excited about a lot of different ideas, and I kept sort of riding that excitement into casting on new things. I guess my philosophy, I guess I don't want to say philosophy because that makes it sound much more like intellectual than it is. My ethos also sounds pretentious. My modus operandi. The way I vibe with knitting is I like to just sort of follow whatever is giving me energy and excitement at a given time. And sometimes that's just casting on a bunch of new projects because I have a bunch of ideas that I'm excited about and that just feels good. And sometimes I start to feel overwhelmed by the number of projects that I have. And I guess I kind of have to like trust that eventually I will swing back into a mode where it just feels good to finish things. And it kind of makes me think about, it's like different seasons. Like whenever it's summer, I feel like I can't believe that I would ever want it to be winter again or even fall again. Like I just want it to be summer. And yet by the time fall comes around, I'm like craving it again. And I just kind of have to trust that I'll crave something new, it'll feel good. And I like to not have knitting feel like something negative, like something I'm avoiding or a chore. There definitely are times that I'm kind of procrastinating, but I also think that it's good, especially for a hobby, something that you love to do. I think it's good to give yourself, I don't know, the freedom to just follow what feels good. Even if that is not like necessarily goal-oriented. And actually it's kind of funny because like the first video I ever shared on here was my knitting goals for the year. I do set goals, but I find that I like that for sort of overarching goals. Like here's things I want to learn this year. And I don't find it that helpful for project-specific goals because I find that if I'm kind of telling myself, oh, I need to work on X, Y, Z, sometimes that's just not what I'm in the mood for, and I start to like frustrate myself and I just stop enjoying knitting at that point. And my goal above all else is to never stop enjoying it. So that's why I like to give myself the flexibility. And like every person is so different because some people would probably, if they casted on too many things, might just feel overwhelmed and stop knitting entirely. And honestly, that's how I felt, and not the stop knitting entirely, but I have started to feel overwhelmed by the number of projects I had going on. But that's when I just trust that the pendulum swift, I think I was combining shift and swing. The pendulum will swing in the other direction, and then I'll be like, oh dang, you know what feels good? Not casting stuff on, but finishing it will feel good. Why don't I focus on that? And thank you to anyone who's been following me and like sticking with me, even though I know it's probably annoying. You're probably like, what are you doing when you see me casting on another project after I didn't finish something that I was talking about in my previous podcast? I wish I were the type of person or the type of crafter who just always picked one thing and delivered on it, because that seems satisfying to watch for sure. Like I would want to watch a person who's just always finishing stuff. But I pretty much do always come back around to a project if it had something that I was genuinely excited about. I pretty much always do revisit it. It just might take a little bit of space from it to like let the frustration dissipate and then let myself sort of come back and re-find whatever it was that I was feeling excited and energized by in the first place. I do think about being a more single project at a time. And there are some projects kind of earlier when I first started knitting, I kind of felt like I didn't have the trust in myself, and I felt scared that like I found this new hobby that I was interested in, and I was scared that if I took a break or didn't finish something, it was going to mean that I was like a quitter or that I was going to give up on the hobby altogether. Because this was my first like crafting hobby really. Kind of slogged through some things that I didn't end up even really liking the end result of or feeling that good about. And now that I know that knitting is like clearly a really great part of my life, I feel less scared about like giving myself the space that I might need from a given project because I know I'll come back. Or I'll find something else that is really exciting. It looks a little weird. This is just moisture on top of the yarn. So I'm gonna let this marinate, I guess. So thanks so much for watching. We've got our blocked tank marinating. I've got my sweater finished that I'm probably going to wear tonight. I'd love to know what you worked on during this video, if you worked on something, or what are you procrastinating on right now with any projects of your own? Because believe me, these are not the only projects I've been procrastinating on. So maybe I'll do another one of these videos. Again, I'm still within the hour that I set for myself, so it was nice to like have a little working session to just force myself to confront these. And you're curious to see what happens with these projects, follow me and I will share them in an upcoming podcast episode soon. I'm really excited to talk about them. Okay, that's it. See you next time.